Hi everyone, it's Dr. Weebreck here from your Intro to Sociology class. I hope everybody's doing well and staying safe. I know during our last class we had talked about the possibility of some schools being shut down. And of course now we're sort of in uncharted territory with the idea that you guys don't have an time frame as to when you're coming back. So right now we're going to do everything via online. I hope you already got my email in reference to our upcoming classes and sort of what's going to be expected in the next couple of weeks as we wait for the final sayings as to when you guys can return. So I wanted to go ahead and finish out chapter 3 with us. Remember to go ahead and get your bonus into me if you haven't already. If you have questions about the bonus, feel free to email me or text me or call. We can get that resolved. As well as you want to make sure you're working on your mass media presentations. That means that I definitely want to make sure that that paper's in. The PowerPoint piece of it and the presentation part of it, we will hold off. I don't know if we want to do something maybe via Zoom. That's another option for us to look into, that maybe we could do that, or Skype, but I don't know if everybody has those capabilities, especially on your Google Chrome. So we'll have to talk about that a little bit. Maybe I'll send out a poll or something and see what everybody's options are. The other thing that we want to do at this time is if you have questions about that mass media writing assignment, make sure you get that into me. I gave you a little bit of an extension on that just with the current events and stuff, but that way you have enough time to plan and prepare. Pick a movie, pick a TV show, analyze that from the concept of gender and race and social class. We're looking at maybe the life course history of things, look at all those aspects of things. Maybe it's the culture, the cliques that emerge, or groups. We want to make sure that you're evaluating it from all those different lenses and see what you can find out in each one of those videos and movies that you guys see. I think you guys will be thoroughly surprised at how some of these movies and TV shows depict certain parts of our society. So I'm excited to sort of see what you guys come up with. So definitely the paper just needs to get turned back in. If you need me to take a look at it prior to that, make sure you just email it to me and like you did before, we can get that edited and I can send it on back to you. All right, so let's go ahead and move forward with the final piece of chapter 3. That way you guys have all the information that you need, and we'll continue to move on with chapter 4 as we're sort of looking through this upcoming week. I know some of you said you don't have books. That's okay. I'll try to get you guys as much notes as possible. I'm going to do these videos so that you guys can jot down some notes along the way, but hopefully you guys will have some of that information. And of course, I will give you guys review prior to that midterm. And if you guys need anything else, just let's talk it through. We'll accommodate and be as flexible as possible. All right, so the final piece that I want to talk about is the major life phases of the life course. We started to talk about that slightly. I did go ahead and post that on Google Classroom, the breakdown, as well as on Brightspace and your emails of those final components. We know that the life course is that phase from birth to death. And we talked about that it's an ever-evolving process. You are going to continue to go through this for the rest of your life. And so it's sort of interesting when we look at the dynamics of how each of those stages play an important role in your development. We know that childhood is from birth to 12 years of age. And we talked about how during this point of time, we start to see that history is sort of incorporated into certain social locations. Where did you grow up? What was your gender? Did you have a certain social ranking that was sort of played a part in your upbringing? Those biological features that we sometimes forget about of a child are sort of universal. You're tiny, you're dependent upon somebody else to help care and raise for you. And those social experiences of a child differs from each culture. So living in Somerset County is going to be vastly different than perhaps living in a third world country. So it's really important that we look at that during this life development as well. Okay, so moving on to the next stage is adolescence. Adolescence is from ages 3 to 17 years old. This allowed us a time in our society where we began to really evolve, especially during the Industrial Revolution. We know that during that time frame, kids were actually in the workforce. But then it evolved, that we now know that, parents look at this as a time for kids to be young and to sort of explore their childhood a little bit more. It's known for being that stage of uncertainty. There's some inner struggle that exists during this time frame, and of course, rebellion. We talked about initiation rites that sometimes can occur within our society as well. These can be conducted in certain types of tribal groups, and then we use the example of that picture of that one particular group where they had to jump over that bridge. And so it was sort of important for us because it signified that passage from childhood into adulthood. And if you remember, when we look at our society, we see something probably close to that in the graduation ceremony. When you guys go to graduate, we have that big ceremony. Maybe your family has a party for you, that type of thing. It signifies that right that you're then ready to move on to adulthood. And so that's an important stage. It doesn't obviously look as intense as having to jump over a giant boulder, or go on a walkabout, or having to go, something else a little bit more physical. But it definitely shows us that we're moving on to that next stage of our life. And that next stage sort of marks that initiation that you're ready to move into your adulthood. Modern society, not biology, sort of made this phase of an inner struggle. We know that in today's day and age, it looks very different during adolescence for individuals. And I think you guys demonstrated that in some of the movies that you guys chose, and some of the things that we see in our media too. So that's definitely something you guys can look at if you opted to choose something of that age demographic for your movie. All right, the next stage is our transitional adulthood. This is 18 to 29 years of age. And let's say post-industrial society sort of extended this youth period within our life course. Think about it. When you're 18 through 29, you might be doing something very different. You might not be ready to settle down and have a family. We might at this point in time be, maybe you're going backpacking across Europe. Maybe you are, traveling more, or you're doing a semester at sea, or something different. Maybe you're just doing career exploration. That's a time that we've decided in our society, interestingly enough, that we don't necessarily have to be an adult just yet. We might be extending that youth period a little bit more so that you can experience new things and continue to have those moments of learning that in prior societies that wasn't the case. You entered into adulthood by that point. Maybe you had children and were already married. So that transitional adulthood stage looks very different for you and your generation versus your parents, your grandparents. Okay. People under this phase also are neither psychologically adolescents nor are they sociologically adults. Think about that. You might not be ready to psychologically handle some of those transitions that occur into adulthood, as well as some of the things socially that we expect certain adults to be able to handle and to take on responsible wise. So those are all important components for us to look at during these stages. The fourth stage is your middle years. That is ages 30 to 65 years of age. It's actually broken down into two parts. The first part is your early middle age. Okay, so this is 30 to 49 years of age. A majority of people that become more certain in this life stage. Think about it. You might have a career by that point. You might have already started a family, but some common problems that could arise during that stage would be divorce or unemployment. So we begin to see that middle life stage can be challenging for some individuals. We then shift to the later middle years. Like I said, they're not very specific or very creative with the names that they chose. But here we're looking from ages 50 to 62, okay? Here you're going to start to see that a lot of individuals are plagued with maybe health problems. They begin to start thinking about their mortality and start to hound the majority of the people, that type of thing. They start to look at, did I accomplish everything I want to? That's why they call it a midlife crisis. So it's important that we begin to look at that stage a little bit closely as to how that can develop. And we began to see that when we looked at Durkheim's work with the rates of suicide, and we began to see those that were in middle age had very high statistical rates. So it's important for us to see how that plays in the part of what's going on socially for them, as well as biology wise. What else is going on physically with them as we begin to see these transitions. All right. The older years is the final stage. We're looking at 63 years old and above. Okay, so we have the transitional older years, which would be 63 through 74. Okay, again, this group is broken up into two parts. So that first part, we begin to know that people greatly know about death. That's a very realistic part in their life. They've maybe have experienced good health, and this phase could be considered as an additional extended period of their middle years, because we know that people that are in their 60s and 70s look great nowadays. They're taking better care of themselves. They're taking care of their wellness and their physical health so that they're living longer. So you're going to start to see that some of those individuals, that's not necessarily the end-all be-all once they hit that stage, that they are really extending their middle years much longer as a result of that. The later older years is 75 years old and above. This often signifies growing weaknesses and illnesses. You're going to start to see that, physical ailments begin to become very apparent sometimes for individuals. But like I said, some individuals are very, very healthy into much later of their years. I'm sorry, my dog is walking around. You're going to start to see some of that stuff. So it's important that we look at those later older years, because it's shifted the way that we look at old age greatly. So that's it of our major life phases, of course. And I think one of the other things that's important for us to talk about when we look at socialization is, are we prisoners of our socialization process? We know that we can't necessarily control those outside external factors that impact the way that we're raised sometimes. So it begs the question, are we prisoners of socialization? So what are your thoughts? Are we? Do we have the right to make choices in our lives that dictate some of that? Are we actively involved in that social construction of ourselves? I think those are really good questions for us to begin to pose. So I want you guys to start thinking about that a little bit more as we dive into chapter 4. All right, so that's it for today. Review that stuff. Keep working on your mass media stuff. Friday, I'm going to have another post, which is going to start into chapter 4. Feel free to utilize any of this information for your mass media stuff. But okay, if you have questions, get a hold of me. Be safe. If you need anything, I am very accessible and very via phone, text message, email, Brightspace, or Google Classroom. I'm going to go ahead and post all this stuff. Thank you guys for being so willing to reach out to me during this time so that we can make sure that you guys are continuing to learn, keeping yourself busy. I wish you guys nothing but the best. And again, if you need anything, get a hold of me. All right. See you next class.